So thank you everyone for joining us today. We are excited to be here. My name is Dr. Rosanna Bro. I'm the director of the Child Study Center at Virginia Tech. And this is Ms. Jasmine Lewis, who is a fourth year doctoral candidate in our cognitive neuroscience and biopsychology program. And we will be jointly delivering today's talk on child emotional development and strategies to help kids manage emotions. We will be posting the recording for today's talk on our Child Study Center YouTube and website so that it's available for families who weren't able to attend live today, or if you want to go back and access some of the resources that we'll share at the end of today's talk.
Awesome. So first, we want to start off with taking a moment to have you all to think about how did your parents directly or indirectly talk to you or communicate to you about emotions? And this is what did they show you? Or what did they say about the value and the place and appropriateness of emotions? So think about that. We're going to put a link in the chat for you to be able to put your answers in. But we would love to kind of hear from you all about what was communicated to you about emotions as a child. Mm, I see nothing is a popular answer, and we don't talk about it. Stop crying, or crying is okay. Um, Emotions are normal, or some things. At your age, wow, it could be worse. Private, bad, yeah. So basically, the idea of what this question is getting at is emotion socialization. And basically, all that is basically how parents influence children, how they identify, understand, and regulate their emotions. A child's ability to manage their negative emotions can deal with our genetics, our temperament naturally, and it can also be by our environment, our home environment, our school environment, our family. However, research has shown that parents do have an influence on how children regulate their emotions. Emotion socialization, it's an umbrella term for a range of emotion-focused parenting practices. And this includes how parents model emotion regulation and displays. So, for example, if you're happy, are you smiling? Are you showing enjoyment? But also, too, if you're frustrated, are you modeling, going for a walk or taking a deep breath? It also includes how you talk about emotions. So whether it is to your children about their own emotions or even your own emotions. So, for example, if you are having a bad day and you're frustrated and you yell at your kids, coming back and saying, hey, I was frustrated earlier. It wasn't okay to yell at you. I was upset. But just having that open dialogue is important. And then lastly, how you react to your child's emotions is also under that umbrella. So speaking of that, there are a few ways that you can react. Some more helpful and supportive ways is validating how they feel or reflecting back in emotion. For example, if they're happy or excited, embracing them in that enjoyment. Also helping them to problem solve as well. Like if you see them going through something, just talking them through how they're feeling and comforting them if they do have a sad emotion or a negative emotion. Some unhelpful reactions could be punishing a child if they feel a certain way, minimizing how they feel. So it can be both ways. So negatively, saying like, oh, it doesn't matter, whatever. Or if they're happy, saying, hey, calm down, And another thing could be escalating. So if your child's already upset or angry, yelling at them or getting more angry at them is only escalating it more.
So as Jasmine was just getting at, children are not going to always be able to manage their big emotions, both positive and negative emotions. They can really become overwhelmed and end up having meltdowns or explosions. This happens, when you're out in the grocery store or somewhere in the public. It can happen in the classroom. It can happen at home. And when children are displaying these meltdowns, it can just lead to further distress because of the punishment or consequences that they often receive because of these emotional displays, as Jasmine was just talking about. Sometimes this means that they might miss out on an opportunity, like saying, oh, we're not going to the playground anymore, or taking like consequences like taking away screen time because they hit their sibling when they were upset. Or at school, this might look like something like detention or missing out on recess. And unfortunately, what research suggests is that when we punish or minimize children's emotions, we're actually not teaching them coping mechanisms that are required to better manage these situations, and actually are sometimes communicating that emotions are bad or that something's wrong with you for feeling these emotions. And so hopefully at this point, both from kind of this introduction that we've done, or just the fact that you're at today's webinar, hopefully you've bought into this idea that you as a parent, teacher, or other caregiver can influence your child's emotional development and help support healthy emotion regulation through active modeling, as well as directly teaching various strategies. And so before we jump into talking about some of these different strategies that you can use throughout different developmental stages, I just want to touch briefly on some of the components of emotional development and explain a little bit about what typical emotional development looks like in children. All right, so emotions provide children with invaluable information about themselves, about their environment, and most importantly, their relationships with other people. Developing the ability to identify, understand, and integrate emotional information are all critical aspects of emotional development. And when these are able to be achieved successfully, we know that they're associated with a range of positive social, academic, as well as mental health outcomes for children as well as adults. So we think about emotion identification. This is the ability or tendency to recognize feelings, both in yourself, but also, as we'll talk about when we move to emotion awareness, extending that to others. So being able to identify and label our own emotions is crucial to understand how emotions influence our thoughts as well as our behaviors. We know that during toddlerhood, children really begin to develop this emotion identification, and not just for basic emotions like happiness or sadness, but also self-conscious emotions like shame or embarrassment, as well as pride. You can all think about that, 2-year-old who just learned something new or is able to do something and is beaming at doing so. We also know that this is when, really early in the toddler preschool years, that children start to understand that emotions can be associated with particular events or situations, such as being sad that a parent might have to go away on a work trip for a couple days because they know that they're going to miss them. And so emotion identification really develops early in childhood, though we know that people can continue to struggle with it, particularly people with different disabilities like autism, even into adolescence and adulthood. This can be a challenge. The second aspect of emotion development is emotion awareness, which is the ability to recognize and identify the feelings of others. This is such a critical aspect to social emotional development because it helps us to understand and other people's perspectives and that they might be different than our own. It also helps us with developing empathy towards other people and is really critical to help us with managing conflicts when they do arise with other people. During early childhood, children begin to understand that express emotions that we see on others don't always necessarily match their own internal or subjective experiences. You can think about acting happy, even though you might have feel disappointed that you received a present that you're maybe not super excited about or that you already have. We also know that children during the preschool and early childhood years are able to understand that there are emotions in particular situations that they have that might not necessarily be the same as others. So, they might be at an amusement park with their friends and they might be super excited and happy and think this is great. Whereas their best friend might be feeling really worried or scared about going on that roller coaster. And so recognizing that their own experiences and emotions are not necessarily the same. And they're able to differentiate during childhood that certain emotional experiences and expressions may be appropriate to share or to express in some situations, but not necessarily in other situations. And this is really the early foundations of emotion regulation, which is the final part of emotional development. Emotion regulation has really become a hot topic term over the last 10 years. And this is really just the ability to manage and express your emotions and thus your behaviors in a healthy and constructive manner. Emotion regulation is crucial for maintaining positive relationships and dealing with the everyday stress that we all experience in an effective manner. Different emotion regulation, or sometimes these are called coping strategies, can be utilized to manage different emotions. For younger children, these are often much more behaviorally based strategies like taking a deep breath or distracting yourself with an activity. Whereas for older children, adolescents, and adults, this can be much more cognitive, such as what we call emotional reappraisal, which just means changing the way you think about a situation or think about your feelings related to that situation. This can also involve kind of suppressing your emotion or trying to, not display the frustration or anger you might be feeling in a situation. And even though these strategies are often done in older children, we know that starting even in the preschool years, children are able to use some basic cognitive strategies like talking themselves through emotionally challenging situations. And this is getting at this idea of self-regulation. And self-regulation actually begins at birth, but it continues into young adulthood as our frontal lobes continue to develop until about the mid-20s. We know that when a person is able to self-regulate, they're better able to control their impulses, make better decisions, and not overreact when upset or excited. That's obviously easier said than done. Nobody, even adults, are always able to perfectly self-regulate. We always have times where we might overreact or wish that we said something we didn't, as Jasmine mentioned earlier on. And we know that people with certain disabilities are going to be more likely to have difficulties with self-regulation. This includes people who are experiencing anxiety or depression, people with neurodevelopmental disorders like autism or ADHD, and particularly for children with these different disabilities, but for children in general, it's so critical, as we're going to spend most of the rest of today's webinar talking about, to support children in developing this self-regulation. Young children and even children in middle childhood and sometimes even adolescents, they need help from others around them. to really navigate strong emotions because they don't yet have the ability to fully do this, especially for those really big emotions. I always talk about the emotional roller coaster, and once they're up at that peak, they're not going to be able to get down on their own necessarily. And so it's trying to keep that peak as short as possible. And so, as Jasmine was mentioning in the introduction, being able to model and have conversations around different strategies that your child can use really can help lay the groundwork for strong self-regulation in later childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. I really want to highlight that all of these different strategies that we're going to be talking about, they're not going to magically change things overnight, but as much as we can be consistent in using these things and acknowledging, when there are mistakes or helping them problem solve through when your child makes a mistake, it does help build this social emotional language as well as comfort and skills. And I just want to acknowledge in saying that many of you on the call today, myself included, we weren't really taught these things as children in school. And schools have started to introduce this, but it's still critical, especially in early childhood, that parents and caregivers are supporting emotional development. Because we know from research that starting even in infancy, we can tell who's going to be likely to have difficulties with self-regulation. So, infants who are quick to react or who are really hard to soothe are more likely to have difficulty, but parents can still help support self-regulation starting with infants and toddlers. And so a lot of those strategies are some of the things that are just good general parenting practices, making sure that we have a sensitive, warm, responsive environment, that you're a soothing presence, particularly during, transitions, times of distress. If your child is upset, obviously giving them comfort, that loving words, hugging them and providing comfort items like a stuffed animal or blanket, or for younger kids, a pacifier. Being able to do these things and also respond to their cues. Like if you know that maybe they're in a room that's too loud and they're starting to cry and be distressed, maybe take them to a different room. Children are going to learn that soothing and self-regulation through this modeling. And so, if when your child is crying, as hard as it can be, I say this as the mom of almost 2-year-olds, if you're getting upset and distressed in that moment yourself, it's modeling that for them. Instead, if we're able to kind of take a moment, take a quick breath, or, tag out with another caregiver and have them help in that moment so that you can be able to better regulate and not get distressed yourself. You're not avoiding the situation or being a bad parent in that moment. You're actually modeling really good self-regulation and self-care. And that is helping teach your child over time to not act as impulsively or overreact when they are experiencing distress. Related to this, despite, as I was saying, needing adults to help often with self-regulation, it is still good to encourage self-soothing in infants and toddlers. This is things like encouraging them to suck on a pacifier, or hugging a stuffed animal or lovey, or helping them be able to distract or turn their attention away when they're in an upsetting situation. For young kids, this is often trying to distract themselves by turning their attention to a caregiver or a sibling to seek comfort. And by encouraging these behaviors, it helps children learn that they can calm down on their own rather than always needing a parent to hold or rock or shush them to help them calm down when they're upset. And finally, even in infancy and with toddlers especially, caregivers can start talking about emotions and helping build that emotion identification stage by labeling emotions, pointing them out in book characters when they're feeling sad or happy or angry, or noticing different situations where even you're in and you're like, wow, I can tell you're really happy or you're enjoying this right now, to help build that early foundation. And this is going to continue into the preschool years, where your parents are really going to continue to focus on helping children recognize and name the emotions that they're experiencing, but also pointing these out in other children or other adults. And this can really help give your child a wide emotional vocabulary, making sure that we're not just labeling the basic emotions of sadness, happy, maybe angry, trying to use other things like worry or frustration, pride, to help them really build that emotional vocabulary, asking them questions as well, like, why do you think he's feeling upset? To see if they can start to understand what might be going on from contextual factors, or also helping them understand how you might be feeling and why. So, I feel so proud of you when I see you sharing your toys with your brother. Um, this can be done as well when you're reading or watching a TV show, being able to label or talk about emotions or trying to understand why a character might feel a certain way based off of their body language or the language they're using or the contextual clues that are going on. Um, if it seems like your child is struggling to answer these types of questions, it can be helpful for you to point out a time where maybe they might have felt that way, or a time where they've been in a similar situation, to make it be more related to them. For some kids, that more abstract thinking about a not real character or person can be hard. One of the other things that's really great to start doing, and it's wonderful, a lot of daycares and preschools have these charts now. I have some examples on the next slide, but using emotion charts to help kids name how they are feeling in a given moment, or as they get older and start transitioning, some kids are able to do this on their own, but having like a daily check-in and saying, how are you feeling right now, or being able to say, like, it seems like your body is moving a lot more than usual. Are we maybe feeling a little bit silly right now? Or are we feeling excited? And helping them really identify those feelings and those clues that might indicate what they're feeling right now. And there are much more complicated ones. These are ones that you would use more with like a preschool or elementary school age child. As kids get older, there are some of these that have like 50 different emotions. There's even some really cute ones that tie into Inside Out, which has the second movie about to come out. And so being able to build in and work on those things that your child might have interest in to help build that emotion vocabulary. To be thinking about developing some of those basic self-regulation skills, even in the preschool years, we can really help children think about things that they can do. So if they're feeling afraid, if they're feeling angry, encouraging them to distract themselves, or be able to, like, sing a song, take some deep breaths if they really can't avoid that situation. Um, Other times being able to talk through, like, okay, so, we know that we're going to the mall today. There might be an Easter bunny there, and and your child is afraid of costume characters. Being able to say, so we're not going to walk by the food court area so that we don't see the bunny, because I want you to have a good day, and helping them kind of label that. So some of that avoidance might be appropriate, especially early on. We know that when children are throwing tantrums, it is often because they don't know how to handle the situation or get what they want. And so being able to work with them in those moments to help them calm down, doing it with them, taking some deep breaths, holding their hands together, helping them realize, I know you're feeling a little afraid right now, or I know you're feeling a little angry. Let's both take some deep breaths to help us calm down, and then we can figure out what's going on. This is, again, modeling those helpful regulation strategies, helping them also understand that it's okay to feel that way. There's nothing wrong with those emotions, but we don't want to get so worked up that it starts to cause problems in our behaviors or prevents us from doing something fun that we would otherwise want to do. One of the things you might be picking up on is that we need to get kids to a relatively calm state in order to really be able to talk through strategies or understand what they could do differently. If we try doing that at that peak of the emotional roller coaster, it's not going to be effective. And so when they are calm, try to find those opportunities to talk about feelings and strategies for what they could do if they end up in that situation again. Don't try doing it in the middle of the meltdown or when they're actively, hyperventilating because they're scared about something. We can also be proactive. If you know that there are certain times in the day or certain situations that are particularly triggering for your preschooler, being able to set up either a visual schedule or trying to keep regular routines with reminders or warnings to help with that transition can be really helpful, as well as using like fun activities like singing a song while you're cleaning up to do something to help with that self-regulation and make the transitions easier can be really good strategies during the preschool developmental period. These are two examples of visual schedules that could help with transitions and self-regulation, as well as setting those clear expectations. There's lots of ways to do this. Oftentimes you can use if you can laminate it, and then you can use a dry erase board to block it off, or if you have it up on the fridge or in a bulletin board in the room or something, they can put magnets or other things to mark off when they do different things, or using the reusable stickers that they can move around to indicate when they completed things. So you're not having to print out a new piece of paper every day. As children transition to elementary school and really during this kind of childhood period, so we're thinking about kind of like 6 to 10-year-olds right now, their ability for emotion identification, that first stage, should be solidly in place. And for most kids, it is at this point. They're also have the foundations, as I was alluding to earlier, for emotion awareness and some basic emotion regulation strategies to help with managing stress. During this developmental period, children often use avoidance, so distancing themselves from a situation that might be upsetting or making them worrisome. And this is especially true because they often have little control over their environment or situations. And so that is the easiest thing for them to implement, is distraction or avoidance. And so we need to give children opportunities to practice other regulation strategies during this time period and have grace, when they might not be able to successfully implement those. Just like any skill, if they're learning to ride a bike, if they're learning to play baseball, it takes repeat practice, and it takes practice at times when they're calm and able to effectively use that skill to be able to then effectively use it when they're feeling afraid or upset. So again, having different opportunities for discussion when they're calm to talk about different ways they could handle tricky situations in the future, or different choices that they could make differently the next time that issue arises. This is really helping them develop those problem-solving skills. It can also be really helpful during this developmental period to help them act out what they might say in those situations, or think about, actually role playing what they could do differently. This can help them then be able to better apply those skills in real time when they're needed. You can also offer helpful phrases that they might be able to say when they're feeling frustrated. So things like, I can do it, I can stay calm, I can stay patient, to help kind of with that self-encouragement during it. Using visuals continues to be a good strategy for children during this developmental period. There are lots of great videos and online resources that can help with this. I'm going to share some of these resources at the end of today's webinar, but I also just want to kind of note what I mean by visuals briefly here. So, you can encourage your child to draw a picture of a place where they feel happy, calm, and loved. This is sometimes referred to as still quiet place. This is a mindfulness exercise that adults use by imagining it, but for younger kids, it can be really helpful to have something visual to help bring them to that place and be able to think about all of the details associated with that place to provide that calm. You can also use visuals, like a visual thermometer that you see here with our friends from Inside Out. This can be used to help a child kind of indicate their emotional temperature, or you can kind of be indicating where they might be feeling based off of how they're acting. in a situation. And so there are lots of different ways that this can be done. I've seen this done with Jedi mind practice and using the force and helping them be able to build self-regulation, playing into whatever your child is really interested in can be a nice way to help them with building and using these skills. And as you're doing all of these things, unlike the preschool and toddler years where you're the one labeling and leading a lot of these, we want to be able to move during childhood to the child being able, again, for more of a typically developing child, that might be easier. For kids with different disabilities, particularly autism, ADHD, or anxiety, they might need more support with you continuing to help label, but you asking them or encouraging them to do this. Being able to delay reactions, helping them consider negative consequences that could result from reacting in the way they might want to. You have a kid that comes home and is like, I'm going to go in tomorrow and I'm going to, whatever it is, hit him back, or I'm going to tell him just how I feel, helping them understand, well, if you did that, might you get in trouble, or what might help? But happen can help lead to less intense behaviors. It also continues to help build up those problem-solving skills. While doing this, though, it is really important that we are validating our child's emotions. We all as parents are, naturally doing this with our younger kids of, oh, let me kiss your boo-boo, or, it's okay, I know it's upsetting when we can't have what we want. But as kids get older, we start to do this less and less, and we often attend to and react to the behavior that the emotion causes. But it's really important that we separate the emotion from the behavior, and understanding that, it's okay for you to feel upset or for you to feel disappointed, but it's not okay in communicating whatever the problematic behavior was. And that way, you're still validating their experience, or you can even be able to reassure them that you understand, I feel that way too when my friend says something mean to me. So again, communicating that emotions are okay and that there's nothing wrong with them for feeling that way. If we think back to that Mentimeter cloud, a lot of us have had messages communicated from childhood around emotions are bad, or something is wrong with you for feeling any way other than positive. And we know that that is just not helpful to think that way. One of the other things for children that can be really helpful is having a list of coping strategies that they can use. Coping skills or coping strategies are just anything that a person can do to help them feel better, and that's not harmful to themselves or others. For younger kids, you can provide prompts them to help encourage them to use one of their coping strategies if they're experiencing a strong emotion. You can also model the use of your own coping skills whenever you're feeling a certain emotion. So, saying, I'm getting upset right now, I'm going to go take a walk. Or, mommy's had a hard day, I'm going to go take a warm shower for a few minutes and I'll be back, assuming that there's someone else or that they're playing and entertained at that point in time. All of these different things are really critical for, again, continuing to model, but also to ensure that your child is not being exposed to high levels of dysregulation. If we're thinking about if they're seeing when you've had a bad day and you go to swearing or getting physical or yelling or, just being really dysregulated when you come home, that is kind of modeling that this is acceptable behaviors. And we don't want to be expecting our child to be able to have better regulation than we might be displaying ourselves. And so having a toolbox or a range, here you see a coping skills wheel. Here's an example of a coping skills toolbox that highlights different skills they can use at different times that they're feeling different emotions. This is actually from the zones of regulation, which is what the 4 different colors are. I have that listed as one of the resources later on. But it's also getting at this idea that you can't use the same coping skill every situation. You know, if your coping skill is to go for a run, well, if you're at work or you're in the car, you can't go for a run in that moment. And so you need to have a range of skills and things that you can do in different settings. So taking a deep breath or being able to call a friend for support on speakerphone if you're in the car, to help with managing those emotions is really critical. So it's critical for you. It's also critical for our children to have this toolbox or this range of skills. So I'm gonna have us practice one coping skill just to kind of put this to life and give us a little bit of a break from me talking. But we do have a couple different examples on the next few slides. This first one is just a really easy, fun one. It's called Take 5 breathing. This really just helps kids slow down, take a breath, and focus on their breathing. There are lots of different ways that this can be done. What's nice about Take 5 is that all they need is themselves, because they can be tracing their hand, breathing in and out. This can be even simplified down to what's sometimes called belly breathing, or really just focusing on good breathing, which is breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. What kids often do when they're told take a deep breath is they start to like go in through their nose and out through their mouth, and they can actually cause themselves to hyperventilate more by going in through our nose and out through our mouth. It is physically cooling down our system and building in that self-regulation. If your kids are struggling with being able to do that, I can find it really helpful for having kids kind of think about smelling the flowers or smelling their favorite food. Sometimes this is called pizza breathing. Whatever it is that, you know, would help them focus on in through their nose and then blowing out. It can be, you know, like blowing out birthday candles, or if you're doing the smelling, it can be, you know, blowing out with a big sigh because it just smells so good. So, and you can be exaggerating with it to really display that to your child, the in through the out. The reason why I put this Take 5 breathing up here as an example is that many children find that sensory aspect of, you know, sliding their fingers up and down through their hand to be really soothing and settling. If your child dislikes that sensational aspect, you can use something different that still involves the breathing. And so that's where you can do breathing where they pretend that their hand is the birthday cake and that their hands are the candles. And so they slowly will take the deep breaths going in and out. And as they blow out, they put a finger down for each of the deep breaths as they blow out the birthday candles. This can also be done. There's ways that you can like trace the sides of a star if you print that out. So there's lots of different fun ones online. But I'm going to have us all practice just for a moment. Nobody can see you besides me, and I've already made a fool of myself to practice or showing this. So we're going to do 3 deep breaths instead of 5. But again, I really want you to focus on having your feet grounded, focusing on good breathing in through your nose, out through your mouth. So, and we'll breathe in and out both on counts of 5. So in, out. In, out. In, out. And I know that the chat is disabled for all of you, but I want, if you feel comfortable, you can put it in the Q&A, or you can just think about it yourself. I want you to think about something you just noticed, either in yourself, or I'm actually pulling up. This is another example of a self-regulation strategy, a grounding skill. Thinking about while you were doing that, was there anything that you noticed, that you heard, or you smelled? What things did you see if you kept your eyes open, or feel? These are different ways that we're really focusing on being present in the moment, calming ourselves down, awareness in the moment. This is definitely what I have up here right now with the grounding exercise is something you would do with more older children and adolescents, not with the toddler or preschooler, but the give me 5 or this spaghetti noodle example that's up here can be done with younger children. This is a really simple muscle relaxation that's really fun for young kids to do, where they kind of focus on tensing up their body like uncooked spaghetti and then letting it all go like cooked spaghetti. As kids get older, you can move through progressive muscle relaxation where they focus on tensing and relaxing each component of their body, their shoulders, their hands, their legs. And so these are just some different examples of physical or behavioral regulation strategies to build up, but things like using exercise, talking to a friend, different behavioral things, as well as cognitive things that they can do are important to build into that toolbox. And that's especially so as we move to adolescence. I just want to briefly note, despite emotional development continuing from early childhood into adulthood, we know that adolescence in particular is a period of really intense emotions and actually poor emotion regulation, with adolescents using less adaptive and more maladaptive strategies such as aggression than they would use either in earlier or later developmental periods. So this is where they're most likely, to really like ruminate on and continue to think about or withdraw themselves or give up in a situation. And so despite having a lot of gains during childhood and often being more independent in using that, we do know that this period can be really hard, and that adolescents often will turn more to their friends and peers than they are with adults, particularly their parents. And so that said, it's really critical that when your adolescent does come to you or wants to problem solve through an emotion, that you do validate their experiences. Oftentimes we don't understand or agree with their emotions in a situation, but again, being able to separate that emotion from the behavior and validate what they're experiencing. If their best friend said something mean to them and they're upset about it, even if oh, you'll be fine again tomorrow, or it's not that big of a deal, being able to say like, it is really hurtful when our friends say something mean to them, like, what can you do to make yourself feel better? Kind of putting that more on them in that situation can be good. By minimizing and saying, oh, you're overreacting or being so dramatic, all that does is decrease your adolescent's likelihood of coming to you in the future for support, or their likelihood to disclose when they are in challenging situations. And related to this, it's important to not pressure your adolescent to talk about something at a particular time and making it about you and on your terms. It's by creating a more supportive environment. Anytime they do choose to share an emotion, it's going to make them more likely to do so. Or finding times where they might be likely, if you're on a drive or you have some one-on-one time, that they could open up, but not by asking them, so how was your day? Or expecting them in that moment of like, it seems like you're mad, what's going on? Because they might not want to at that point in time. Instead, saying something like, it seems like you've been down a little bit lately. If you do want to talk about it, or if you want to do something to help make it feel better, like, I'm here for you. Related to this, it can be really, really helpful. I do this with adolescents. I do this with my, friends, my parents, my partner, where if they come to me with something, I'll sometimes ask them, like, before they go, what do you want from me right now? Like, what would be helpful? Because if we jump right to trying to problem solve or fix the situation for them, and all they really wanted was to be validated or reassured or just to vent, that can actually backfire and lead to not feeling like a really supportive environment. And so while you're having these conversations with your child, when they have come to you, being able to help them recognize that their emotions are temporary in that situation, even though they might seem like they're never going to go away or that this is really intense, can be helpful. And then the last piece, just to mention here, is that during adolescence, we do want to encourage them using other sources of social support besides us. This is needed on the path to independence for them to become functional adults. And so if they start going to friends or older siblings, a coach, or cousins, aunts, uncles, whoever, to discuss or problem solve through emotions, that is okay. And actually is a positive thing that they feel like they have a range of people who they're comfortable going to and building up that support system. in addition to all these strategies, I'm going to pass it back over to Jasmine, who's going to highlight some general healthy habits. We have about 5 more minutes of content that we'll talk about, and then the last 10 minutes we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah. So what we know is that physical health often affects our emotional health. And so I'm going to go through 3 different healthy habits to kind of help with regulating emotions. So one is sleep. I think we can all attest to like when you get less sleep, we can be a little irritable, and the same for your children. So ensuring that they have a bedtime and that it's consistent both on the weekdays and the weekends is very helpful. Having a routine at night can also be very helpful. Just it signals to our body that it's time to kind of slow down and get ready for a rest. Also, limiting screen time. So that means, cell phones, video games, TV can also be helpful when it's time for bed, and having a comfortable environment, meaning minimal noise, minimal lighting. If your child shares a room with a younger sibling, it could be just talking about strategies of how to limit interruptions at night. Next is healthy eating. It's very important, as we all know, to have a balanced meal and to eat all your meals. If you're hungry, that can make you a little hangry, right? So I think it's important that, we all eat properly and your children are the same way. And then lastly, exercise. I think the main key here is just to be active, like to get your body moving, to get your energy moving. And it can also be a good way to actually cope as well. So for example, if you see your kids kind of, getting a little irritated at each other, or, getting really, upset, it could be good to kind of say, hey, let's all go outside, go for a run, pass around a ball. It's just to get our bodies moving. And 30 minutes every 5 days a week is what is recommended, but just moving the body is very helpful. All right. Lastly, I want to go over a few things. So first is people don't always know why they feel how they feel. So I think it's very helpful, as we already heard a lot often in this training, was that, it's okay to talk to your kids and be like, hey, I noticed this, when I had this feeling, I felt this way. Is that how you feel? And you can also use nonverbals as well. And you can just tell how they're acting. And kind of say, hey, I see you doing this. How are you feeling? Next, an unexpressed emotion may be driven by another unexpressed emotion. So again, as I said, it can always be helpful to kind of just ask them what is the root of how they're feeling, because sometimes they may feel frustrated, but then in reality, it's because, oh, well, I couldn't do this, so I just got mad. So it's good to kind of talk about that, and also to talk about strategies for how to, react differently in the future. Next, emotions are often irrational, but that doesn't make them wrong. And making your child feel bad for how they feel can make them feel worse. And then lastly, healthy habits are important for regulating our emotions. As I said, physical health affects our emotional health.
All right, so before we open it up for questions, I just want to briefly touch on some additional resources that we wanted to share with you today. There are lots of different books, YouTube videos, apps, things that are out there. These are some of our favorites for a different developmental period. The Monster Meditation series is put together by Sesame Street and Headspace. They have some awesome books for toddler and preschool age children that really focus on the foundations for self-regulation, deep breathing, mindfulness, that use all of our favorite Sesame Street characters. Mindfulness Maya is a YouTube channel that also now has a series of books associated with it for a range of topics like positive self-talk and self-love, but also embracing emotions, including negative emotions. And these are really brief videos. They have lots of those different deep breathing strategies and different mindfulness strategies that have these cute two little characters that act them out and show them with these really nice videos. And then, because I know that we have a range of providers and caregivers on the call, I wanted to mention the Zones of Regulation curriculum. This is a curriculum that teachers or parents can use to support self-regulation and emotional control. This is really geared primarily towards elementary school age children, but there is some stuff that's appropriate for adolescents as well. It includes so many different resources. They have a mobile app, they have a digital curriculum that's actually coming out this spring. They have a series of books associated with it. And I really like, they have tools to try cards, which there's one set that's for kids, which are like 5 to 10 years old, and then one set that's for teens and tweens, so 10 plus. And each of those decks of cards have 50 different easy to use coping strategies, and the cards are meant to help, encourage them to learn and practice using them. And then they also have opportunities for self-reflection related to the different activities. The last thing before we truly open it up for questions with the Q&A, so you can start putting your questions into the Q&A now, and Jasmine and I will answer them. But I wanted to make people aware of 2 different ongoing research studies taking place through the Child Study Center, both of which seek to help with self-regulation. And so these may be of interest to your family, or you might want to share these with families who you think might be interested. The first one, Support Branch, seeks to assess the feasibility, acceptability, and benefit of the Support Branch parenting program used in combination with a clinician-delivered behavior therapy. And this is part of a stepped care model for reducing child behavior problems and increasing parents' feelings of competency and supporting their child's behaviors. This study is going to be taking place this summer and fall, so it's a little bit more time limited. The Relax intervention, which is specifically for adolescents ages 11 to 16 who've been diagnosed with ADHD and are struggling with emotion regulation. We will have groups for this running over the next 2 years. That said, there is also the Relax Coping Program, which the link is in the bottom right corner of your screen, that is available and open. This is a self-paced interactive website. It's free to use. And this is really geared for middle school, high school adolescents and their families to use. So great chance to kind of, the resources that were on the prior slide were a little bit more for preschool through elementary age. If you want to keep building it, the Relax Coping Program is another great resource. So thank you so much for your attention so far. We will open it up for questions at this time. Again, feel free to drop the questions in the Q&A and we will start answering them. So there was a question about where we can find the pictures of emotions of characters from Inside Out. I will get those before, and can send it both in the email and see if I can put it in the chat before we leave. Yeah, and just a parent that had a really nice comment saying, like, learning that you don't need to personally react when your child is reacting to a big emotion. I'm so glad that that's your takeaway. You both have, the ability to regulate and choose helpful actions. One of my favorite things that we talk a lot about in the Relax program actually is that taking space is not avoidance. It's not disrespectful. Having that moment to prevent yourself from both escalating and working up and saying things can actually be a really effective strategy. If you think about your work life, if you think about your romantic relationships, it's not productive to just stay and yell, but we often do that in parent-child relationships. And so using strategies instead is really effective. Okay, another really great question here. I will take a first step at this, and then if Jasmine, you have more to add for any of these things, please feel free to do so. The question is what to do when adolescents don't have well-developed emotional vocabulary. I just want to validate you are not alone with having this experience. That's, where Relax came from, is that we talk about the fact that yes, emotion identification and awareness should be in place by age 10, but many adolescents and many adults still struggle with this. So all of those strategies that we talked about, even for the earlier developmental periods of helping label, helping them identify, thinking about within, whether it's movies, manga, TV shows, books that they might like, having them and using that as like, well, why do you think the character did this? How might they have been feeling, or what have they been doing? Trying to have that, especially if you have a child who's neurodivergent, that still is very developmentally appropriate and can be a more fun way of doing it. being able to, again, talk out loud, and it might feel silly and weird. You're not going to do it all the time, but narrating how you're feeling and why and what you're doing to regulate is going to help build that emotional vocabulary. That said, we do know that there's just variability, and some kids and some adults don't have as large of a vocabulary. And so they might never fully reach other peers, and that's okay. But doing these things will continue to help improve it. Jasmine, if you have other things you want to add.
No, I totally agree with that. And I'm just trying to think in my experience working with adolescents, I sometimes just try to model on myself. I've done that in the past of just being like, hey, I felt this way, and just actually physically showing an emotion can actually help them to kind of identify as well. So being like a sad face or a mad face or whatever, just that has helped me.
There's another really nice question that's in the Q&A around having a child on the spectrum that often has difficulties at school. The school's aware of the issues, but trying to understand how to better help him recognize when his emotions are going into the red, and helping him calm down. And said the teachers try, but can't be with him all the time. These are really great conversations to be having during IEP or 504 meetings of, sometimes schools will be able to break policies or rules around, like, children can just go for a walk. They can kind of give a sign or something if they can feel that they're getting upset, and, do a lap around or go walk to get a drink of water without needing to get to the meltdown point, or, to be proactive about it. So trying to be creative with some of those things. For younger kids, or if you have a kid who has an aid, sometimes using those visuals, like literally having clearly, some of it, that getting into the red, that they can kind of just indicate or say that, or, even hold up a red card to be able to communicate those. So I think thinking through, they don't need to necessarily be able to say like what's bothering them or why or what they need, but just indicating like, I am getting overwhelmed right now. Maybe it's because it's too loud or noisy, but giving them a range of, here are the things that are safe that you can do, that we're okay with. And that needs to be a conversation with the school and with the teachers. But most of the time, schools are willing to work with families on those things, because it can actually lead to more time in the classroom if they're able to proactively calm down, rather than leading to a major meltdown or issue where they then need to be taken out or having the teacher's attention taken away. I know that's not a perfect solution. I'm trying to find, while talking, so there's a whole series, this is the Inside Out ones. So like, this is one of the book series. I'm trying to find the chart right now. But the chart that I'm thinking of that I really like has, if you think about the end of Inside Out, where they have all the different blurs of emotions, it has the main emotions and then shows kind of the nuances in between them. And that's the one I'm trying to get. I will keep looking for that while. This is another example of this. I can share my screen actually with, this is actually on a website from Vox, but that kind of shows these different range of emotions. This would be much more for, I would say, like a middle school, high schooler, because it gets into like intrigue, loathing, but talks about where the intersection of these different 5 basic emotions are. And I'm really excited to see what happens with adolescence and introducing all of the new emotional characters in the movie that's about to come out. But I am having a hard time. Some of these, honestly, there's some on the teacher websites that like you can just purchase for like $1 and then download and print them, or Etsy has some that you can purchase them yourself, but a lot of them have been made. But there is one that I thought was by Penguin Random House that you could purchase. This is a great, I'm literally on Pinterest right now, but this is what I was speaking to that question I was just answering, where you can have like different basic cards. This just has feeling angry, feeling sad, and feeling good. And so the like being able to indicate like, hey, I'm starting to feel, and it might not be sad, but just if you use the zones, it's the blue and the red of like, I need to go if there's a movement room, or I need to go for a drink of water, or sometimes teachers have just like a quiet space that they can go even within the classroom, or a movement space if they're starting to feel a little dysregulated. And so really talking to the teachers about what is possible. But those visuals can be really nice. All right. Well, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. It is 1 o'clock right now. Thank you so much for coming today. We will send out the materials and the link for where this recording is posted should you want to come back to it.